Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the More Than Just Insurance podcast. I am so excited to have our guest today. He's going to be talking about his work with young men and develop them in our community and some of his community service projects. So without further ado, I am going to tell you about our guest. Today, we have a very special guest joining us for part one of an insightful two-part conversation. Our guest is a transformational leader, executive coach, and mentor who has dedicated his career to shaping future leaders and empowering communities. He is president and CEO of Leadership at Its Best, LLC, where he focuses on leadership development, executive coaching, and life skills training, especially for African-American youth and young professionals. With an extensive background in corporate leadership, he has held executive roles at Goodyear, Blockbuster, Viacom, and Ryder System, helping organizations strengthen their culture, diversity, and employee development program. Beyond the world of corporate life, he has also served as two-time international president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, making history as the only man to serve twice as the fraternity's international president, first as the 27th and later as the 29th president. He has also been a former Akron, Ohio city councilman and a key leader in Who's Who in Black, recognized by Ebony Magazine as one of 100 most influential African Americans. His leadership and commitment to community has inspired generations. I am glad to have none other than Dr. Carter D. Womack here with us today. Carter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be with you. See you again.
Thank you, sir. We're going to talk about your service and the things that you do with the youth. I'm just going to let you go for it here. We're going to go to the next slide and, tell us about your parents and upbringing coming from Greenville, Alabama.
Okay. Always when I have an opportunity to speak with individuals or organizations, I always first give honor to God for giving me the opportunity to be here, and always to recognize my mother and father, the late Jesse and Matthew Womack. So I'm the 10th child of Jesse and Matthew Womack, born and reared in Butler County, Alabama, in the big, small city of Greenville. I'm the 10th child. There were 6 girls and 4 boys, so I was the baby of 10. And now there are 7 deceased and 3 of us left. My oldest sister, Lily, lives in Panama City. She's 88. Now the youngest sister lives in Alexandria, Louisiana, and she is 83. So I grew up poor, Black in Alabama. Take baths in a dish pan where you put the water in a little pan and you wash up, and once a week you got a full bath in a big tub that was either in the backyard, somewhere where you would be showered down with a hose because there was no running water in the house. So I grew up poor, Black in Alabama, graduated from Southside High School, Greenville, Alabama. From there, I went to college, Alabama A&M University in Huntsville, got a degree in chemistry and a minor in mathematics. So it really was like a dual degree. That's my upbringing in Greenville, Alabama. My mother and father married when they were 14 and 15. My mother was 15, my daddy was 14. Neither one of them ever had any formal education at all, not going to any level of school when they were married at those young ages. My mother was a housekeeper. My father had his own business. He was an entrepreneur. He was a sharecropper because the home we lived in, he didn't own. It was owned by the rich white doctor living on his property. But my father was a sharecropper, and he started his own farming business. He sold wood because back in those days, there was no electricity and no electric stoves or gas stoves in the home. So all the homes were heated by wood. So my father cut down trees, sold wood, and of course, he put his baby boy to work in that field as well.
All right.
Those were some interesting and good days and best days sometimes in Greenville, Alabama. If I look back on my upbringing and the commitment and love that I got from my mother, father, and entire community, because there was a strong network. If you did something wrong in school before you got home, mama would have known. The phone lines then were everybody was on the same line. So you pick up the phone, you're going to get the people down the street talking, and then you would hang up. And sometimes you would listen in to see what they was talking about.
Oh,
So trust me, there was no secrets in Greenville, Alabama, in the neighborhood where I live. But I'm blessed.
Tell us about high school and Alabama A&M. What actually drove you to go to Alabama A&M? What got you there?
Well, it was a couple things. Being Black and poor, I did not want to go to Alabama State, which was right up the street, 35 miles from home. Didn't want to go to Tuskegee University. It was a college then. My oldest sister, Lily, who's living, went to Tuskegee. She bragged about Tuskegee. She come to Tuskegee So I chose to go to Alabama A&M. It was 4 hours away from home. Mom and dad couldn't get to see me that long. All of my buddies in my high school decided that we were getting as far away from Greenville. We all went to Alabama, and I got recruited really by some of my homeboys who were members of Phi Beta Sigma, convinced all of us that we should come to A&M, and ultimately they recruited all of us, and we became members of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity.
Oh, okay, awesome. When you got there, did you know what degree you was going to take up when you got to Alabama A&M?
Oh yeah, when I left Southside High School, some great teachers that were loving, embracing, and encouraging all of us to go to school. One of my favorite teachers was Mr. Marshall. He taught mathematics, and he said, "Boy, you could be good in mathematics. You ought to go to whatever school you ought to be a mathematician, et cetera, et cetera." Because the best careers that Black people had then was teachers. You were a teacher, a nurse, or a preacher. So I went to school and decided that I wanted to try chemistry out. Back then, there were only 5 students in my class majoring in chemistry. So we all knew each other. So I got my degree in chemistry and a strong minor in mathematics. I was afraid that I wasn't going to graduate.
Why is that?
Because at Alabama A&M then could not graduate with a D in your major. So
is this for a class? Is this like a class? Or
you could not get a D in a class.
Okay, all right.
In your major.
Okay.
And I got a D in organic chemistry when I was a sophomore.
But did they make you take that class over?
Take it over.
Okay.
The last time the organic class was available for me to take, the last semester of my senior year. So I just knew, I can remember the professor's name, Dr. Libby Chow. She was a little short lady, and I had dreams that I wasn't going to graduate. I know my folks would have killed me if I came back to Greenville, Alabama, and didn't graduate. So I made it through.
Got it done. That leads into your corporate job at Goodyear.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So did they recruit you? Or how did that work? Or did you reach out to them?
No, I was recruited. Alabama A&M had a strong career placement office. I will always remember the director, Ethel Henderson, who happened to be a great Zeta woman. She coached us and made sure that when the right folks came in, that we had interviews. They made sure we had white shirts and ties and looked our best and coached us through the interview. So I was interviewed by Goodyear. I got 3 different offers for jobs. One in Minneapolis, Minnesota to work for 3M. One in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where my siblings had moved to with P&G. Then the other one was with Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio. So I took the one in Akron because it was close enough to my siblings in Pittsburgh, 3 hours away, but far enough away that I couldn't live in Pittsburgh because I was a baby and my sisters would have been all in my business. I would have had no life of my own if I had moved to Pittsburgh. So I moved to Akron, could drive over, and started my career at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in the chemistry department as an analytical chemist.
Wow, that's awesome. So when you got to Akron, did you get an apartment? How did you get yourself established when you first got your new job?
In Akron, Ohio, it was not like it is now. They didn't give you corporate apartment. They didn't put you in no hotel. I stayed in the hotel 2 or 3 nights a week. Back then, racism was still strong, even in 1973. So they gave me a list of Black rooming houses.
Okay.
So I went through the list and found a rooming house that was reasonable. I lived in the basement of this lady's home. She had about 3 or 4 other men living there. We had our own little rooms, a little shower. And I was down in the basement underneath the steps in a single bed, bought myself a little small TV and caught the bus, or in many cases, walked 7 miles back and forth to Goodyear. I hated it.
Wow.
But she was nice. She could cook. Food was good, but it was reasonable. I was making $950 a month. That was before taxes. Okay.
It wasn't necessarily bad money back then.
It wasn't necessarily bad money back then, but as we started talking about wealth building, it was a start, and it was a good start. I met some wonderful people in Akron that changed my lives and influenced me to be the person that I ultimately grew up to be in Akron. I tell people, I grew up and became a man.
You're in Akron, you're living your life, and moving over to becoming the international president of Sigma for the first time. Give us a little glimpse of how did you make that transition from working at Goodyear, you starting your career, starting your life, and then now you're the 27th international president of Phi Beta Sigma.
There was a lot of time between that because I graduated from college at 20. I turned 21 after I graduated. So I lived in Akron for 14 and a half, ultimately automatically got involved with the fraternity because when I moved to Akron, I called my fraternity's international headquarters and said, give me a name or the number of somebody. So I called Brother Ken White that I'm coming to Akron, told him when I was going to get there, stayed at the Holiday Inn downtown. So I called Ken. When I got down, Ken came, picked me up after I got in my room, took me to his house, introduced me to his wife and his kids, and we became best buds. And he recruited me to join the alumni chapter, Delta Rho Sigma in Akron, and I got involved in the chapter, got elected to office, being elected at one point president, and then being elevated to state director for the state of Ohio, and ultimately staying involved in the fraternity in the Great Lakes region. I was elected the regional director of the Great Lakes region as a part of this whole journey through Sigma, and then moved into being elected to serve on the general board of the fraternity in various general board positions. And I was not elected president in Ohio either. So,
okay. Now, full disclosure, everyone, I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma as well. I'm in college during this time frame, 88 to 92. So I remember you were in the Jet magazine.
yes.
And there were some
And
tough
Ebony.
times. And Ebony. We'll talk about Ebony in a second.
Okay.
But I remember in the Jet magazine, and I had just pledged spring of 89. So I know the fraternity international-wise was in some strain at that point, and you kind of fished us out of it. So can you talk about that a little bit?
We made Jet magazine for the first time as a written story when I was international president because of our commitment and really recruiting some phenomenal brothers to serve with me when I was international president, like Charles Whitaker, Charles Talbot, Ron Carter, and others who served with me in leadership roles in communications and marketing. It got us featured in Jet with a full story that talked about the history of the fraternity, what we were doing, where we were going, which was a historic piece for us. And it also looked at branding and promoting Phi Beta Sigma as this organization that was moving forward to impact and change the lives of all those that came before us who encouraged us to do that. And all those young men and young women and people in our communities helped to be the best today. It was exciting times, but a lot of hard work.
Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the fraternity going through some financial difficulties during that time frame?
Well, financial difficulties were always for a small fraternal organization. So our focus was really on how do we grow membership, get our numbers, continue to grow. And then also during that time when I was international president, both as 27 and 29, all of our organizations in the panel and the council, then there were 8 organizations. There were the 4 fraternities and the 4 sororities. And we were all dealing with this whole fight against hazing and illegal activities that were against the law and against the rules and regulations of the fraternity. So we were all facing this battle of educating members that hazing was obsolete, against the law and against the rules and regulations of the fraternity. So we had some challenges during those times of dealing with hazing. And among those times when I was international president, and I also served as the 28th national president of the panel and the council, between the time I was the 27th president and the 29th president, I was elected by the National Panel and Council as the 28th National President of the Panel and the Council. And that during those times, we had to convene a summit of all the fraternity presidents, first vice presidents, and legal counsel to come together with a master plan to talk about if we're going to survive, we must all work together to focus on eliminating hazing activities that was running rampant within our organizations. It was not just a Black organization. It was running rampant in all of the fraternities and sororities, both Black and white.
And the reason I spoke with you about this before we talked about it is that I wanted to get this out from the horse's mouth instead of just having somebody say all these rumors about this, that, and the other. And I wanted you to expressly talk about, because you were in the mix, you were actually hands-on, feet on ground, doing the work. And I wanted to dispel any type of urban legends of what was going on with the fraternity back, I guess what we call it, the late 80s, early 90s, or mid 90s area.
That's right. Well, I convened with other leaders and chaired the summit that was held in St. Louis, Missouri, to really talk about the elimination of hazing and us agreeing on what the title would be. We said there's no more pledging. We came up with intake. Each organization worked together, shared their designs of intake processes and procedures, what we wasn't going to do, what we wasn't going to do, because none of our organizations back then had any liability insurance. No liabilities. Other Black fraternities had liability insurance. So we were dealing with our survival by the hair of our chinny chin chin, the money that we had in our banks, or the membership potentially coming out of our own pockets to save our fraternity. But the blessings are that we worked through it, and we have gotten stronger than ever before. But it took work, and we still have work to do.
Let's talk moving forward. We talked about you were in Jet. Now let's talk about your covering on Ebony being the 100 most influential African Americans.
Well, Ebony Magazine, for those who know that are listening that are of the age, will remember Ebony Magazine. Ebony Magazine was the true publication that told the story of African Americans across the board in all realms of life, from the affluent to the bathing beauties that were in the Ebony and Jet magazine, because Ebony and Jet were owned by Johnson's Publishing Company. So it was the same company that owned them. So Ebony had this group called the 100 Most Influential Blacks in America. And at a point, they had excluded the fraternity presidents until a group of us had to convene a conversation with the publishers of Ebony to talk about you're overlooking 8 organizations that represent a mass number of educated African Americans who are very influential in making changes in the community. They then, early on, before I became president, made the decision that they would be including the presidents of all the fraternal organizations in that magazine. I can't remember who our first president was that was included in it, but I think it might have been attorney brother Richard M. Ballard Jr.
Okay.
So I was among that great list of men and women, and really was a good group of people that would be convened at many times by Ben Hook, who was the NAACP president at that time. He would convene many of us, and he had special meetings with just the presidents of the NPHC organization to talk about collaboration around getting more members in the NAACP, supporting the NAACP, and those relationships still continue through this day.
Awesome. Man, that's some history right there. Is Dr. Hook still alive?
Oh, no, Dr. Hooks is gone on the glory. He was a phenomenal person.
Yes, I heard a lot about him. All right, so we're going to move on. Leadership at its best. It's not a nonprofit.
It's not a nonprofit. We do have a nonprofit that I founded in support of the work that we do with Leadership at its best.
Okay, so let's run through your work with Leadership at its best. Remember, Carter, CEO of Leadership at its best, a driving force in helping young African-American men and young adults. I know this has been a very successful project for you for at least 20 years now, or more.
25.
Let's talk about it. When did you decide to create, and what persuaded you to create Leadership at its best?
I always had a vision of starting a company and organization, but when I was last job, the reason I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, I was recruited aggressively by Value City department stores, and Value City department stores ultimately merged with DSW Shoes under one umbrella, and I was hired by Value City department stores as the first African-American executive in the history of the company as the senior vice president of human resources. So they merged, and the president of Value City department stores ultimately became the CEO of the merged DSW Shoes, and I was then made the executive vice president of human resources for DSW Shoes. When my good friend retired, they hired a new CEO for DSW Shoes. He wanted to bring his own person on board. So I was laid off. Really not a bad layoff because I had a contract. So I always tell young people, when you get a job opportunity, there are a couple of things you always ask for: a sign-on bonus, grossed up. If it's a senior level job, ask for a contract. Make sure the contract is solid. So I had a contract. So under the contract, they had to pay me an X amount of years left over at a senior level at the company. They provided me a vehicle of my choice for Black Escalade, and they paid for it and gassed it up and maintained it and laid off, and my agreement kicked in. The automobile plus my pay and maintenance continued. So after that, I decided that I wanted to look at starting my own company. Had always had this idea about doing work with the young people and working with our young people through my fraternity's engagement with our youth program, the Sigma Beta Club. So that's how I really got started.
Okay.
And it wasn't easy. I had a big head. I figured I could do everything. I could do human resources. I could do executive coaching. I could do training. I could do public speaking. And then woke up one day and said, boy, you cannot do all of this. And then I invited my protege, Marco Watson McMillan, to come to Akron for a long weekend. And we sat down for 3 or 4 days and plotted out all the scopes of the work that we wanted to do with our Bold Brothers program. Was created for a long weekend in my house for 4 days on paper, and then started to put together, bought a great team of graphic designers, and that's how we got started.
Why is the BOLD initiative so important for you?
So let me tell people what BOLD is. BOLD is originally started out as Black-Male Orientation to Leadership at its Black-Male Orientation to Leadership Development, BOLD. So that was BOLD started off because the initial focus was focusing on 100% Black males. And that's still the primary focus of what we do. But we opened the program up to all boys. And you see from our graphics, because once we started to go into schools that we did in Columbia, Maryland, in Houston, Texas, and in other parts of the country, even in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where Marco was, we went and did some work with boys there. So we determined that bold really now becomes brothers orientation to leadership development. Still bold because urban boys, regardless of their race, face some of the same problems. Inequality, poor home environment, treated differently in urban schools than they would be in majority schools. So we just wanted to spend some time working on these things, working with boys. So we've had some phenomenal successes over the years. We've been in probably a lot of the suburban schools where we come in and we do leadership development, life skill training, and teach our boys to be the best that they can be under the umbrella theme that they are bold and born to win. So that's one of the taglines that we work with our boys.
What ages do you start with?
Yeah. We have worked with pre-K through high school and college because some of the boys who graduate, we tell them they can never graduate. They can only be elevated. So when they graduate from college, we encourage them to stay involved in our junior advisor program. Many do, but we really start as low as pre-K and go into schools because the earlier you get our boys, we've learned the better we have the opportunity to help them be the best that they can be.
Okay. So can you talk about your volunteers? Because you were trying to be a one-man band. So now you went and got a band. So what about your band of brothers?
Well, Dr. Don White, who used to be in the Sigma Beta Club, I work with Don in Akron. He is my executive vice president. Shay, who's my project manager for the Bold programs. I have a communications and graphics design person, Linda Smith. She does all the graphics design that you see. She keeps the website up to speed. And then I have Don's wife, Karen White, who's coming on board to be the president and chair of the Bold Brothers Foundation, which we just organized last year as a nonprofit wing of the program. And we got a band of volunteers, Sigmas, Zetas, people in the community that come in and support the work. That we have our Bold Brothers Conference scheduled, and we're planning for 75 to 100 boys. And all of our conferences require that a parent accompany their sons to the experience because we have parent meetings to teach the parents and talk about issues that they may have. We do that to create this parent network so they got other parents to talk to because, and believe it or not, most people think that all of our boys are raised by single mothers. That's not the case. We have 30% men who are raising their sons and their children because there's no mother in their life. So I wanted to dispel that myth that all these boys and girls out here being raised by single mothers. That's not the case. Brothers are stepping up, raising their kids when they have to.
And also the two-parent household too.
Definitely. And they come along with their kids to our meetings.
Awesome. We're going to come back to our slides. We're going to move over to leadership, legacy, and personal insight. What would you tell your younger self as you look back on everything?
I would tell my younger self that, boy, you did all right for a country boy from Alabama, that I was a good kid. People say, oh, you were spoiled. I said, no, I was loved.
What would you tell young people today from what you've learned over your decades of experience?
I tell people, honestly, the things that I was blessed to do really became important to me from watching my mom and my dad who worked hard, didn't have anything, and sacrificed so that me and my siblings could do what we could do. And I was the end of the line that really got the benefits of my siblings pouring into me when there was nobody, when it poured into me, as well as my mom and dad. My mother, Jessie Womack, was a church-going woman. She was a praying sister. Mama made sure that we was up, walking to church with the kids from down the street. I can close my eyes and see my mom at church. I was sitting on the bench that she sat on because nobody sat in my mother's seat but my mom, even after she died. And then just to be able to teach us at the school, going to Alabama A&M and folks saying, hey, you can do this. And people just poured into me. And it was my obligation to really do the best that I can do and make my mother and father proud of what I was doing. And then I learned from others, be able to give back. Because if you don't give back, then you don't receive. So this is part of who I am. People say, why are you still working? You're 72 years old. Why are you still working? You should be retired somewhere. I said, so what would I do with my millions of dollars if I just did that? That was a joke.
Hey, check this out. That leads to my next question. How do you see your legacy?
I would say I see my legacy as finally being true to myself and being open and honest with others. I learned that over time because I tell you, I grew up poor, didn't have nothing. Did I do the best of things with my finances? Because I didn't know, but we'll talk about that in another conversation. I would say I hope my legacy is that Carter was true to himself and he was true to others, and that I gave to others without any expectations of anything in return. I've learned this. I've been burnt by lending people some money, and we all have. I said I'll never lend that a dime again to anybody else. But I also learned that if I'm willing to make a loan, I'm willing to accept the fact that it may be a gift, right? And don't get angry with somebody who doesn't repay the gift. So it went to them as a blessing. And that was a growth process for me. You want to go and have a different conversation with somebody about your money.
I think you mentioned a long time ago, never give money out that you would miss.
Right.
Yeah.
And my legacy in the fraternity, I hope will be the same.
Okay.
I say what needs to be said at times when nobody else wants to say it. But I say the truth is the truth.
The truth doesn't hide from itself. It doesn't have to explain itself. Right.
Trust me.
Some of your takeaways, looking at how you see the future of your program going forward here in the next 5 years.
2023 for me was a stressful time. Work-wise with some of my clients, emotional times because of some deaths and losses of my sister and a niece. So those were some stressful times. So I made a commitment to myself that in 2024 going forward, Carter Womack would not be as stressed as I was in 2023 in any form of fashion. So I took a different look at my relationships with people, clients. And so 2024 was less stressful, and 2025 is going to be less stressful and more focused on doing things that, as you talked about, legacy building and helping build young people. So the launch of this return of our bold conference is to make sure that we can invest in these boys and share our information so that they can be better and to be peer educators for that next generation. So I'm looking forward to what's to come in 2025 and the work that we're going to do with both. The establishment of the Bold Brothers Foundation is that launch to be able to get that financial support that we need for the work that we're doing, and the fact that we're making the program more universal to all boys, regardless of their ethnicity, because the issues our boys are facing doesn't have a color. Glass is just a tinted.
So for the listeners, let me add a little bit of context. The Bold Conference was postponed, and now you're re-implementing them back up. They're coming back again. They're going to get on schedule from their hiatus from there.
Let me also, Jay, our Bold program is not just a one-time conference. The Bold program is an ongoing year-round program for boys. And we recruit those boys through schools, through churches, to people who want to get their boy in something constructive. And normally we would meet twice a month on a Saturday or Sunday for about an hour or two. We'll be going bowling, we'll be taken to the museum, all around self-leadership and development in the group. So even during COVID, we were doing virtual meetings. The conference is an annual thing that we do in order to recruit and get new boys in as we launch the ongoing program. So we're excited about it.
Moving on, your personal initiatives and all the good companies that you work for. So talk us through this.
Okay. So you know that Leadership at its Best is really an organization that offers individuals and organizations an opportunity to work with us with a team of people who are experts in our field. We have a speakers bureau. So if you are an inspiring speaker and you want somebody to promote you in the speakers arena based on your particular skills, we have a speakers bureau that you can contact us, provide us your information, then we will schedule an interview with you to talk about how we can work with you in developing your speaking skills. I do executive coaching. Not a lot, very limited executive coaching with individuals who are interested in a number of things, their own management skills and managing their operations or business. So we do the executive coaching, and we have a system in process and certified to help you in your coaching needs. I work with Bridge Philanthropic Consultants. Bridge Philanthropic Consultants is the largest and the oldest African-American owned fundraising consulting organization. That's a fundraising education consulting organization headquartered in New York, New York. President of the company is Dwayne Ashley, and Dwayne Ashley is a phenomenal young man, certified and does great. He was in charge of the Thurgood Marshall Fund. He left the fund and did some corporate work with other organizations, but it's a phenomenal organization. So I work with them as an executive consultant, really on executive coaching for people within his organization. And I work with Who's Who's Publishing as a consultant, as the chief operating officer for Who's Who in Black. And Who's Who in Black publishes directories that celebrate Black excellence in major markets around the country. We're in big markets. It's a wonderful publication. Go visit who's who in black.com and learn more about Who's Who in Black. I do speaking engagements. You're looking for a phenomenal speaker? call me. I can send you my profile information. So we'd love to have an opportunity to come speak with your organization, your church, your community organizations, or we do some other work with boards and boards of directors. And again, I'm the founder of the Bold Brothers Foundation, which I talked about earlier, that we launched last year. And we're going to be doing our public announcement and public launch of the Bold Brothers Foundation before the end of this year. As we raise,
this is a nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit. The Bold Brothers Foundation is a 501c3, correct. So those are things that we have to offer for those interested in connecting with us and leadership at its best.
I will put all this in the description of the video.
Email just for sure.
So email Carter, let him know who you are, what you want to do, and definitely get back with you.
We work to set people and organizations up for success. And people, it has nothing to do with aid. It's setting people and organizations up to be successful. Because if you're going to work, you want to be as successful as you can and be prepared to make sure that you can help others be successful.
And that leads us to our final slide here. Carter, thank you. We got a part 2, the financial piece of what Carter does as well, and what I do too. I'd like to thank Carter for taking the time to come and sit down with me. It's about helping each other. It's about getting the word out. Communication is key. Communication is king. There are people out here doing good things for the community. And that's the reason for this podcast, because I want to bring on people that are doing real things and helping real people out there. Carter, any last words before we take off and we'll get ready to do part 2 later?
I would just say to all who are viewing, be the best that you can be, willing to share with others. Don't be too stingy. God gives and God will replace. So let's be that blessing to others who we know can benefit from what we have learned and been blessed to earn. With that, I want to say thank you, Jay, for this opportunity to be on your podcast. And I look forward to many, many more of these conversations.
Thank you. This is a blessing. This is a treat. I don't think everybody knows your story. And I really wanted to get that out there.
Thank you.
So people stay tuned. We're going to start talking about the financial piece on part 2 of our conversation. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, in between time, I'd like to thank you again for watching the podcast, and we'll be right back at you real soon. Thank you, and God bless.